Hello, everybody. My name is Matthew T. Fritz, and I was invited here by my very good friend, Deborah Mills Schofield, to come and share my story with you. How many people have that same experience as knowing her? I'm actually thrilled to be here right now, because less than a month ago, I was cooling my heels in scenic Kabul, Afghanistan on an all-expenses-paid, one-year-long business trip, courtesy of the United States military. I was blessed to be a part of an amazing team performing a one-of-a-kind mission at a pivotal point in our country's history there. Over the course of my year in Afghanistan, this was my 9th deployment in 20 years. I was witness to the most complex change management and business modeling challenge I've ever come across. And I'm happy to say we accomplished incredible things through a unique blend of ingenuity, strategy, and appreciative change inquiry. Now, the picture you see on the screens, those are the true heroes of this story. These are Afghan airmen, backed up by their coalition air advisors, working together to accomplish an incredible feat, and that's building, flying, training, and fighting an air force in an active war zone. It's only through their risk, sweat, and pride and commitment that I'm able to be here today to share this story. Now, this is a story about complex change. And I know the setting's probably a little bit different from what some of you are maybe used to. But the variables are very much the same as those you might experience in your home, your church, your school, your community, or your business. So I want to paint a quick picture for you on what the lay of the land looked like for us when we arrived. We had members of our small 17-nation team deployed at 6 different locations throughout the country. Now, each location was pretty different and presented pretty unique challenges, not the least of which was the fact they were going to have to incorporate new aircraft into their training and inventory and operations. We also had 4 challenges that were pretty strong for us. Number 1 was a decreasing schedule. You know, everybody watches the news. The original build of the Afghan Air Force was expected to last until 2020. But due to this dynamic political climate, we began to get the feeling we may not be able to stay past the end of 2014. Now, this is when we arrived in August of 2013 for our piece of this mission. So we began to sense that perhaps we're not going to get as long to do this as we had initially planned. Second was decreasing human resources. This is the lifeblood to our ability to get the job done. And it was being drawn down for us by this same dynamic political climate. As a result, we had to do more with less, and we had less time to do it. Third, we had an underperforming system. Despite all the efforts of the people who came before us in the previous 4.5 years. A lot of the foundational capabilities required for an Air Force to be self-sufficient just didn't exist. For instance, they didn't have enough pilots to fly the aircraft that they had. And worse yet, at the time we arrived, they had 0 instructor pilots, which meant that they couldn't create more pilots on their own if we left. Finally, we had an unsustainable financial system. You know, it's easy early on in the football game to punt the hard problems and the hard financial problems especially till later on in the game. But eventually that clock's going to run out and the bills are going to have to be paid and then something's got to change. So, sound pretty familiar to anybody? Those 4 variables, really not too uncommon. The only difference for us when we arrived was that we had lives on the line. So I'm sure you're asking, so what'd you do about it? Well, we had a 5-step process that worked really well for us. And I'm confident that these same 5 steps, regardless of the scale of the complex change that you're working on, would work very well for you. So I'll break them down for you, real simple. There's 5 steps. The first one was to clarify. Any good strategy for change begins with a clear understanding of where you are in the moment. So we had this epiphany in August of 2013 when we realized that the plan that we'd been marching to for the past 4.5 years and had planned to execute for the next 5 was built upon a foundation that was no longer relevant. So when we looked at our landscape, we made it a priority to clearly understand where we were in the moment, because only then could we begin to address all the variables we'd have to start overcoming as we built a plan forward. Makes sense, right? Well, that's what we thought too, which is why the second step to verify is so important. You know, it's easy for leaders sometimes, especially senior leaders, to understand the 40,000-foot view because it's pretty quick and comfortable. The natural trap, however, is for leaders become so enamored with their own understanding of the situation that they forget to verify that the members of their team share that same perspective. Now, I think something magical happens when a leader makes it a priority to include the members of their team in the process of figuring out, where are we right now? Sometimes the answers don't match up with what you originally thought. So we created epiphanies through a process we called the Random Sample Club. About the time we in the senior leadership began to think we had a really clear understanding of where we were at the moment, we would roam the hallways and randomly grab any pink, furry, breathing body of any rank or position, military, civilian, occasionally a janitor, and we'd yank them into the conference room, and they would let us all-knowing leaders to try to convince them of the brilliance of our story. Needless to say, not a single session survived unscathed. Which brings us to the next step, which I already gave you a peek into, which is simplify. Now, we believe, that this is truly the springboard for success, not just for our team, but for any team to succeed. Because we love making things complicated, don't we? Whether we know it or not. Most organizations, over time, become very encumbered, in the military especially, with many new people's ideas, processes, and procedures. I'd like to think that the natural or the insidious but very suboptimizing tendency of this natural organizational change is to clog the pipes of production and rob the team of the nutrients of time, money, and talent. Well, we're no different. Given that organizations are always changing, constantly in the process of change, isn't it important to try to figure out if the things that we're investing in at the moment truly matter and are providing us some sort of a relevant return on investment? Well, when we looked at what we'd promised over the previous 4.5 years, with all the challenges I just shared with you, it was pretty obvious that some things had to go. We were just doing too much with too little time and too little people. So we borrowed a simple, playful methodology from our good friend Seth Godin and his awesome book, The Dip. I'm sure many of you have read it. And we looked at every single one of our capabilities and determined which ones were absolutely essential for our mission success. And the weeding process began. And what we found actually surprised us. For instance, you might think when you're building an Air Force, the top challenge would be producing what? Pilots? Surprise, it's actually maintainers. Not only do you need folks to turn the wrenches, you need more senior level guys and experienced folks to make sure that the work was done correctly. So we started peeling the onion back on our maintenance production process. And what we found kind of shocked us. In the previous 4.5 years, exactly 0 maintainers had been created for the Afghan Air Force. Zip, 0, zilch. And we needed 1,300 to get the job done. And to make it worse, the process by which you create one of those senior level craftsmen takes 5 whole years. So we sat down with our Afghan counterparts, and we talked with them. And we held first of their kind value streaming events in the country of Afghanistan with our Afghan counterparts in the lead. We overcame a lot of roadblocks. Quite a few of them were completely self-imposed, and we shortened that process by 50%. So how do you know if you're doing a good job of including the voices of your team? When you get the kind of comments we did from our Afghan counterparts, like that. You see, in the process of building an Afghan Air Force, we'd been imposing our own culture, our own way of doing things right upon our Afghan counterparts. But we learned how to do it Afghan right by simply asking them what they wanted and then determining a path and helping them figure out how to get there. This is why I'm such a big fan of STEAM over STEM, and I know Deb will appreciate this comment. Because sure, we had plenty of problems and challenges on the STEM side. But if we didn't ask our Afghan counterparts what they wanted and needed, and then help them figure out how to get there on their own, our mission would never have been successful. So, by increasing emphasis on simplification, we opened up doors to engage with our Afghan counterparts across the spectrum of mission areas. As my friend Deb likes to remind me, we were using design thinking, and a crude version, I'd say, of Alex Osterwalder's value proposition canvas without even knowing it. Who says the military doesn't do design thinking, right? The next step is to modify behaviors. Now, given that we were operating in a war zone across an entire country with significant geographical challenges, You know, it's easy when we talk earlier in those earlier steps about the external processes, but you need to look internally to see how you can extract the best possible performance from your team. So we're widely distributed across an entire country. Critical to us was communication, timely and accurate communication. So we knew we needed a simple, multi-tiered feedback system that we could use to make sure we went out and gathered the voices of our teammates on the front lines so that we could incorporate them into our overall plan and mission. So we chose an off-the-shelf system called BIF10. It allowed us to vertically and horizontally integrate communication across the entire team. Now, knowing that culture is key to improving team performance, we did something really strange. We called for an exception to policy and asked for a command-wide climate assessment for our team. This is largely unprecedented in a war zone. But we knew we needed to gather some information on whether or not we were meeting the needs of our teammates while we were there in theater. And we used the information we got to make sure that some of the processes we were doing with our team were verified, but also to determine some other areas that we might be able to invest in. Most significant of which were the relational capabilities that were critical for our air advisors to operate with Afghans in a high-context culture. So we leveraged our experience with emotional intelligence, and we partnered with TalentSmart and recreated a first-of-its-kind, contextualized EQ training program. Now, this program placed our Afghan counterparts in the position of evaluating how effective we were at relational competence. And the net effect of this investment? Increased production. That's a win. We also had better cross-cultural communication. But best of all, we created the most valuable relational currency in Afghanistan: respect. The final step is to amplify the message. Now, as everybody in this forum is going to appreciate, organizations that make everyone a storyteller win, right? And I don't mean just the CEO here, I mean everybody. In fact, everything I just told you was codified in what we called our story, and every single member of our team was given this story so that they could put it in their own words and spread that message far and wide. In fact, we'd choose some of our youngest teammates to provide our story to some of our most senior visitors. You know, 4-star generals, ambassadors, the Deputy Secretary of Defense. This was the highest manifestation of trust we could place in our teammates, and the feedback was phenomenal. So here we are. I got 2 minutes left. The punchline to the story: how'd we do? How'd we do? In short, we had phenomenal success. We had huge success even by the end of 2013, in those few short months. We flew more hours, moved more cargo, flew more passengers, and took care of the injured and expired in a respectful, expedient manner. And we didn't rest on our laurels either. By about midway through 2014, we reevaluated and we showed a continued positive trajectory. All this progress placed our Afghan partners closer to their goal and their dream of an independent, capable, and sustainable Afghan Air Force. In the end, what was delivered was growth. Real, verifiable, trackable, and measurable growth. And in the process, we just happened to save a couple $2 billion in the process. We reduced the footprint required to do the job, and we increased system capacity. In the end, what we got was right for our customer. Afghan right, not the American way. So thank you. Thank you for listening to my story today. I hope you enjoyed hearing as much as I am passionate about telling it. You know, our story is a story of complex change under extremely challenging conditions on an international stage. I'm honored to have been able to serve my country for 20 years and grateful to have had this opportunity in Afghanistan to learn and share the story with you. Thanks very much for your time. I look forward to seeing you during the break.